governance. We are looking at the proposal known as One Nation, One Election, and we're going to objectively examine exactly what it would mean for the world's largest democracy. Let's just dive right in, shall we? We're going to unpack the mechanics, the potential benefits, and of course, the very real hurdles of this idea. Because if you've ever wondered how a country balances sheer administrative efficiency with the sprawling, wonderfully complex reality of a federal structure, well, you're in the right place. So, what would it actually take to run all of India's elections at the exact same time? I want you to just take a second and really think about the scale of that. We aren't talking about coordinating a small town or even a single state. We are talking about capturing the democratic will of literally hundreds of millions of people simultaneously. It's a staggering organizational thought experiment, right? And as we're going to see, it's one with massive implications for governance, for resources, and honestly, for the very nature of democracy itself. Let's lay down a clear baseline first. One nation, one election simply means conducting elections for the Lok Sabha, the national parliament, and all the state legislative assemblies at the exact same time. The whole core idea here is syncing up the voting cycles. Instead of citizens heading to the polls multiple times over a few years for different levels of government, a voter would cast their ballot for both simultaneously. Now, it sounds brilliantly straightforward on paper, right, doesn't it? Just a clean, simple synchronization of the democratic calendar. But moving from that neat definition to real-world execution, that is an enormous leap. Now, you might be thinking this is some radical, futuristic new invention. But here's a bit of a plot twist for you. India actually followed this synchronized system in the early years, right after independence. Yeah, we didn't always have this continuous, staggered cycle of voting. But, as you can probably guess, over time, the cycles drifted apart. Early dissolutions of some state assemblies and the Lok Sabha meant that governments fell before their full terms were actually up, and that forced fresh, totally out-of-sync elections. It's a pretty brilliant illustration of how a perfectly synchronized system naturally, kind of fractures under the messy realities of politics. So why the huge modern push to bring the system back? It really boils down to three things: reducing costs, improving governance, and minimizing disruptions. Today, because elections are constantly staggered across different states, the nation finds itself in this sort of perpetual state of electioneering. By syncing things up, the ultimate goal is to shift the government's bandwidth away from endless campaigning and redirect all that energy back to actual day-to-day administration. To really grasp the push for efficiency here, we have to understand the current cost, and it is huge. Every individual election currently drains immense resources. We're talking about the repeated deployment of state and central security forces whose primary jobs are urgently needed elsewhere. We're talking about vast numbers of regular government officials who literally have to step away from their normal administrative duties just to manage polling booths. And of course, the sheer financial toll required to organize this on a state-by-state, year-by-year basis is mind-boggling. It's just a really heavy recurring tax on the machinery of the state. Okay, so what's the upside? Well, proponents argue that consolidating elections would drastically cut all those financial costs we just talked about and free up security forces for their actual duties. But honestly, perhaps the most impactful argument is about minimizing the repeated enforcement of the Model Code of Conduct. See, when this code kicks in during an election, new government development projects like, say, building a local road or funding a new school, they often have to be completely frozen to ensure a level playing field for all candidates. So fewer election cycles basically means fewer interruptions, which paves the way for the faster, smoother implementation of vital projects across the entire country. However, we can't just look at this through rose-colored glasses. There is a massive, looming question here, and it's this. What happens if a government falls before completing its term, right? If a state government collapses early, which, as we know, is exactly what happened in the 1960s, how on earth do we conduct fresh elections while somehow maintaining that common, synchronized schedule? Do they just wait years for the next cycle to roll around? Does the whole country have to vote again? This right here is the central, unsolved mechanical puzzle of the entire proposal. Because of these very real possibilities, implementing this system is incredibly complex. Actually, scratch that. It's a monumental task. This isn't just some simple scheduling tweak. It would require sweeping constitutional amendments to legally alter term limits. Furthermore, it demands broad political consensus, which, let's be honest, is absolutely no small feat in a diverse, multi-party democracy like India. We essentially have to figure out how to handle the inevitable, messy realities of politics, but do it within a highly rigid, synchronized framework. Then there's a really highly debated democratic challenge: the risk of dominant national issues completely overshadowing distinct, localized state-level concerns. Think about it from a voter's perspective for a second. If you are voting for the prime minister and your local state representative on the exact same day at the exact same time, is there a chance that a sweeping national narrative might drown out the hyper-local issues that actually affect your daily life? It's a totally valid concern. It's a crucial debate about voter psychology and making sure that regional voices just aren't lost in the overwhelming noise of a massive national campaign. So, when we're evaluating a sweeping reform like this, how should we approach it? Well, there's a guiding principle that states an officer must remain politically neutral, respect the Constitution, and implement government policies professionally and fairly. And honestly, that is exactly the lens we, as observers, need to use here too. We aren't here to take partisan sides, not at all. We simply have to weigh the undeniable administrative efficiency of the proposal against the potential democratic trade-offs, and we have to do it without any political bias. So if a nation were to actually decide to move forward with this, what are the absolute prerequisites? Ultimately, for a shift this huge to actually work, it requires incredibly careful planning to solve all those logistical nightmares we discussed. It requires strict constitutional safeguards to ensure that if a government does happen to fall, the democratic process remains completely intact. And above all else, it requires a wide-reaching public consensus. A change to the fundamental rhythm of a democracy cannot just be forced, right? It absolutely must be agreed upon by the people actually participating in it. Which brings us to our final takeaway, the ultimate balancing act. Any electoral reform, including one nation, one election, has to carefully balance the scales. It must improve governance, reduce costs, and increase efficiency. Absolutely, those are great goals. But it has to do that without ever compromising the federal structure of the nation. It must strengthen democracy, not just streamline it to the point of silencing those distinct, vital state voices. So I'm going to leave you with this thought to chew on. In our pursuit of ultimate administrative efficiency, how do we guarantee that we are actually upgrading our democracy, rather than just simplifying it for the sake of convenience? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. And